The Bible presents Benjamin as Jacob's 12th son and the youngest in the family, born under dramatic circumstances that shaped his life and that of his descendants. He was the younger brother of Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, and held a special place in his father's heart. Benjamin's story is deeply intertwined with events of great significance, from the birth that cost his mother Rachel her life to the conflicts and reconciliations that define the history of Jacob's household. Despite being a small tribe, Benjamin's lineage played a pivotal role during critical moments in Israel's history. Throughout this video, we will delve into biblical and historical accounts to uncover the fascinating narrative of Benjamin. From the early years of his life surrounded by mourning and hope, to the legacy his tribe left in Scripture, you will discover a story full of twists, emotion, and meaning. Get ready for an epic journey through the pages of the Bible, where we will unveil the lesser-known yet equally powerful moments of Benjamin's life and lineage. Benjamin was born during a transitional moment for Jacob's family as they traveled from Bethel toward Ephrath, Genesis 35:16. This context is significant because the journey was not only physical but also spiritual. Jacob had just reaffirmed his covenant with God in Bethel, once again receiving the promise that his descendants would become a great nation. However, this promise came with an irreparable loss. Rachel was Jacob's great love, and her death during childbirth was a turning point that brought both sorrow and meaning to the family's narrative. In the ancient world, maternal mortality was common, especially during long and arduous journeys where access to care was non-existent. The Bible mentions that Rachel began to feel labor pains while the family was still some distance from Ephrath. This indicates that they were far from any place where they could seek help. The extreme difficulty described in Scripture suggests a prolonged labor, likely accompanied by severe complications such as hemorrhaging or exhaustion. The account in Genesis spares no detail in portraying the gravity of the situation. While she was in hard labor, the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid, for you have another son." Genesis 35:17. The midwife's encouragement reflects both a desire to comfort Rachel and an acknowledgement of the moment's seriousness. Despite successfully bringing Benjamin into the world, Rachel did not survive the complications. Her death was an immense loss for Jacob, but it also marked a crucial turning point in the biblical narrative. Benjamin's birth ensured the completion of Jacob's lineage, resulting in the 12 tribes of Israel. When Rachel named her newborn Benoni, son of my sorrow, she encapsulated the suffering of her final moments. However, this name was not accepted by Jacob, who promptly changed it to Benjamin, son of the right hand. This renaming was not merely an act of giving a new name, but an affirmation of Jacob's hope in the midst of tragedy. The right hand held profound significance in Hebrew culture. It symbolized strength, authority, and closeness to God. By renaming his son with this title, Jacob expressed his desire to protect and honor Benjamin, ensuring that his story would not be defined by his mother's pain, but by strength and the promise of prosperity. Benjamin's birthplace also carries deep symbolism. He was born near Ephrath, a region later known as Bethlehem. This seemingly ordinary town would play central roles in Israel's history, being the birthplace of King David and later of Jesus Christ. This connection to Benjamin lends his birth a prophetic echo, as if his arrival was intricately linked to a greater plan in the biblical narrative. The route Jacob and his family were traveling also holds importance. The journey from Bethel to Ephrath passed through a mountainous and arid region, presenting physical and emotional challenges. These details allow us to imagine the harsh reality Rachel faced during her final journey. The exhaustion from the trip, combined with the lack of resources, amplifies the emotional impact of her death and highlights the resilience of Jacob's family in the face of adversity. After Rachel's death, Jacob erected a pillar in her memory near Ephrath. Rachel's tomb, mentioned in Genesis 35:20, became a symbol of both loss and continuity. In the centuries that followed, this site would become a significant landmark for the descendants of Israel, visited by travelers and revered as a sacred place. Interestingly, Rachel's tomb appears again in Jeremiah 31:15, where the prophet references Rachel weeping for her children. This lament is interpreted as a metaphor for Israel's suffering during the exile. This association reinforces Rachel's enduring role in Israel's collective memory and connects Benjamin's birth to future events of sorrow and restoration. Benjamin was Jacob's last son, completing the 12 tribes of Israel. This number was symbolically important, representing completeness and perfection in Hebrew culture. Each of Jacob's sons would become the ancestor of a tribe, forming the foundation of the nation of Israel. Despite the tragedy surrounding his birth, Benjamin's arrival ensured the fulfillment of this promise. But how would Benjamin, the youngest and most protected of Jacob's sons, navigate the tensions of a family marked by rivalries? What role would he play in a narrative already filled with betrayals and emotional reunions? From birth, Benjamin held a symbolic place within the family dynamic. He was not only a final reminder of Rachel for Jacob, but also a vital link to Joseph, who was much older and already burdened by paternal favoritism. While Joseph grew up facing his brother's envy due to Jacob's preferences, Benjamin was spared the initial hostilities, as he was just a child when Joseph disappeared. However, Joseph's absence made Benjamin a focal point for Jacob, who poured all his remaining affection into his youngest son. The bond between Benjamin and Joseph was not merely biological but also emotional, as both shared the memory of their mother and the distinction of being the favored sons. Joseph's absence also shaped how the other brothers viewed Benjamin. He did not face the same envy as Joseph, perhaps because his presence was more passive and because the brothers had already experienced the consequences of their own actions. Yet, Benjamin remained a constant reminder of Rachel and a type of paternal love that the others had never known. When Jacob believed Joseph had been killed, his grief was immeasurable. He tore his clothes, dressed in sackcloth, and refused to be comforted. Genesis 37:34-35. In this context, Benjamin became the emotional center of Jacob's life, not only as the youngest son but as the last living link to Rachel and the memory of Joseph. This favoritism was evident in Jacob's actions. He kept Benjamin under constant protection, preventing him from participating in risky tasks such as the distant grazing that had led to Joseph's disappearance. This overprotection did not go unnoticed by the brothers. But unlike the hostility directed toward Joseph, Jacob's special treatment of Benjamin was met with greater tolerance. Jacob seemed to fear that any separation from Benjamin might lead to the loss of his youngest son as well. This fear shaped the patriarch's decisions, keeping Benjamin at home and away from the rivalries that defined interactions among the older brothers. To Jacob, Benjamin was not just a son, but an extension of everything he had lost. Jacob's excessive protection created a kind of isolation for Benjamin within his own family. While the older brothers shared experiences of work, travel, and even conflict, Benjamin grew up under the shadow of an almost suffocating paternal love. He was treated as a symbol of hope and fragility, less exposed to the hardships and disputes that characterized the relationships among his brothers. This isolation may have contributed to a sense of disconnection between Benjamin and the others. Although he was not a direct target of envy, he still represented what many of the brothers resented: Jacob's favoritism. Benjamin's privileged position unintentionally highlighted the inequality of affection within Jacob's household. As the youngest son, Benjamin carried a silent expectation to preserve the emotional legacy of his mother and Joseph. He was a constant reminder of Jacob's love for Rachel, but also a figure that brought tension to the already fragile balance within the family. While the older brothers struggled to find their place in a dysfunctional family structure, Benjamin grew up protected, but without the same level of involvement in the household's responsibilities. He was both a figure of unity and division, reflecting the complexities of a family marked by favoritism and loss. Benjamin may have been shielded from the open rivalries within Jacob's household, but what would happen when he was placed at the center of the family's decisions? How would Jacob's overprotection impact the events that were yet to unfold? The years of abundance in Canaan gave way to a severe famine, so dire that it forced Jacob and his sons to seek help beyond their land. Egypt, thanks to Joseph's administration, still unknown to his brothers, had become a hub for provisions, drawing people from various regions in search of food. This setting of extreme need would become the stage for the unveiling of secrets, reconciliations, and at the heart of it all, Benjamin would play a crucial role. As the famine reached its peak, Jacob sent his 10 older sons to Egypt to buy grain. However, he refused to let Benjamin accompany them, fearing that something might happen to his youngest son. "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left." Genesis 42:38. Jacob's declaration not only revealed his unresolved grief over Joseph's loss, but also reinforced his favoritism and obsessive fear for Benjamin's safety. The brothers departed without Benjamin and, upon arriving in Egypt, encountered Joseph, who now held a position of power as governor. Unaware of his true identity, they presented themselves and requested grain, but Joseph recognized them immediately. Moved by a mix of longing and a desire to test his brother's character, he decided to use his authority to implement a carefully crafted plan. Joseph accused the brothers of being spies and, to test their sincerity, demanded they bring Benjamin as proof of their honesty. He kept Simeon as a hostage, saying, "Bring your youngest brother to me so your words may be verified, and you may not die." Genesis 42:19-20. When the brothers returned to Canaan and reported what had happened, Jacob was devastated. He could not bear the thought of risking Benjamin's life and, for a time, refused to send him. As the famine worsened and their supplies dwindled, Judah stepped forward to take the lead and attempted to persuade Jacob to relent. He assured his father that he would take personal responsibility for Benjamin's safety. "I myself will guarantee his safety. If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you all my life." Genesis 43:9. Finally, driven by necessity and with no other choice, Jacob allowed Benjamin to accompany his brothers, also sending gifts to appease the Egyptian governor. Before their departure, he expressed his anguish in a heartfelt prayer. "May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you." Genesis 43:14. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph saw his younger brother for the first time since being sold into slavery. The emotion was so overwhelming that he had to leave the room to weep before continuing the encounter. Genesis 43:30. Despite his joy at seeing Benjamin again, Joseph kept his identity a secret, proceeding with his plan to test his brother's sincerity and repentance. Joseph prepared a special meal, during which Benjamin was given portions 5 times larger than those of his brothers. This gesture was not merely an act of affection, but also a test to observe whether the brothers would feel the same envy they had once harbored toward him. However, the brothers showed no jealousy, signaling that they had changed. The climax of the test came when Joseph ordered his silver cup to be hidden in Benjamin's sack of grain. After the brothers departed, Joseph sent his servants to intercept them and accuse them of theft. The discovery of the cup in Benjamin's sack brought terror and despair to the brothers, as they knew returning to Jacob without Benjamin would be unbearable. They were brought back to Joseph, where Judah took center stage in one of the most emotional moments of the narrative. In an act of complete surrender and repentance, Judah offered to stay as a slave in Benjamin's place, saying, For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I cannot bear to see the misery that would come upon my father. Genesis 44:34. This display of loyalty and love was the turning point Joseph needed. He realized that his brothers had changed and that their bond with Benjamin was genuine. This episode not only brought redemption to the brothers, but also served as a pivotal moment that united Jacob's family definitively. With Benjamin at the center of an emotional reunion and an imminent revelation, how would he and his brothers react upon discovering Joseph's true identity? The reunion between Joseph and his brothers in Egypt is one of the most moving and dramatic scenes in the biblical narrative. Benjamin, the youngest, played a central role in this resolution, even without knowing he was part of a plan orchestrated by his older brother. The moment of revelation would not only restore a fragmented family, but also mark the beginning of a new chapter in Israel's history. From the outset, Benjamin was the key Joseph used to test the sincerity and transformation of his brothers. When the 10 brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, the youngest's presence deeply moved Joseph. In Benjamin, Joseph saw the continuity of their mother, Rachel, and a connection that had been lost for so many years. To Joseph, Benjamin was living proof that Jacob's family could still be restored. The staging of the silver cup in Benjamin's sack was the culmination of this test. The brothers, who in the past had betrayed Joseph without hesitation, now demonstrated a completely different attitude. Rather than abandoning Benjamin to his fate, as they had done with Joseph, they united to protect him. Judah's plea, in particular, showed genuine change in their hearts and a desire to preserve their family's unity at all costs. Benjamin, for his part, remained a symbol of reconciliation. Although silent in the narrative, his presence was the catalyst that allowed Joseph to see the transformation in his brothers. He was the bridge between a past of betrayal and a future of redemption. When Joseph saw that his brothers were willing to sacrifice everything for Benjamin, he could no longer contain his emotions. He ordered all the Egyptians to leave the room and, in tears, revealed his true identity. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." Genesis 45:4. The impact of this revelation was overwhelming. The brothers were paralyzed with shock and fear. The memory of the betrayal they had committed years earlier now surfaced, and they feared retaliation. However, Joseph surprised them with words of comfort. "And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Genesis 45:5. Joseph's tears mingled with those of his brothers, creating a moment of intense emotion and healing. He embraced Benjamin first, weeping on his neck. He threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Genesis 45:14. This gesture symbolized not just the reunion of two brothers, but the restoration of an entire family. After the revelation, Joseph instructed his brothers to return to Canaan and bring Jacob and the entire family to Egypt. He provided wagons and supplies for the journey, ensuring the transition was made with comfort and safety. More than that, he desired for his father to see the place God had prepared for them in Egypt. When the brothers returned to Canaan and told Jacob that Joseph was alive, the patriarch was incredulous. However, upon seeing the wagons and gifts sent by Joseph, his spirit revived and he exclaimed, "Enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Genesis 45:28. The arrival of Jacob's family in Egypt marked the beginning of a new era. Joseph ensured that his father and brothers were settled in the land of Goshen, a fertile region ideal for shepherding. The presence of Benjamin alongside Jacob, Joseph, and the rest of the brothers symbolized the complete restoration of family unity. Benjamin, as the youngest son, played a crucial role throughout this story. His innocence and emotional connection with Joseph served as a stabilizing force in a family marked by betrayals and rivalries. At the moment of reconciliation, he represented the hope that even the most fragile bonds can be restored. Now that Jacob's family was reunited, what role would the tribe of Benjamin play in the grand unfolding story of Israel? Following the family reunion in Egypt and Jacob's eventual death, the descendants of the 12 sons became the foundation of the tribes of Israel, with each tribe playing a unique role in the nation's history. The tribe of Benjamin, descended from Jacob's youngest son, stood out not only for its small size, but also for its distinct characteristics and strategic role in the formation of Israel. The tribe of Benjamin was notably smaller than the other tribes. During the census conducted in the wilderness, as recorded in Numbers 1:36 to 37, the Benjamites numbered 35,400 men of fighting age, a relatively modest figure compared to larger tribes such as Judah. This proportion remained small throughout their history, especially after events like the Civil War described in the Book of Judges, which nearly wiped out the tribe. Despite its small population, the tribe of Benjamin stood out for its bravery and military skill. The Benjamites were renowned for their expertise with slings and bows, being described as left-handed warriors in Judges 20:16. This unique skill gave the tribe a reputation for strength disproportionate to its size, enabling them to challenge larger tribes in battle. Moreover, Benjamin's geographical location, strategically situated between Judah and Ephraim, placed the tribe in a crucial position for the political and military control of Israel. This central position made Benjamin a balancing point between the northern and southern tribes, a role that would be pivotal at various moments in Israel's history. The distribution of land among the tribes of Israel, as recorded in Joshua 18, granted the tribe of Benjamin a small but highly strategic territory. Located between Judah to the south and Ephraim to the north, Benjamin's land included some of the most significant cities in biblical history. Jerusalem, for example, was originally located on the border of Benjamin's territory shared with Judah. Although Jerusalem would later become the unified capital under King David, this territorial proximity gave the tribe of Benjamin an indirect but significant role in the city's rise as Israel's spiritual and political center. Other important cities within Benjamin's territory included Gibeah, which served as one of Israel's early political capitals, and Mizpah, frequently mentioned as a site for religious and military assemblies. Additionally, Benjamin's proximity to the wilderness helped connect the central highlands of Israel to the plains and the Jordan Valley, making the tribe a vital geographical bridge. Benjamin's legacy is rich in symbolism. In Genesis 49:27, Jacob, blessing his sons, compared Benjamin to a ravenous wolf, a metaphor that captures the tribe's fierce and resilient nature. In the morning, the wolf devours the prey, and in the evening, divides the plunder, suggesting a small tribe capable of triumphing even under challenging circumstances. This metaphor resonates in the tribe's history. Despite its small population, Benjamin survived crises such as the near extinction during the Civil War against the other tribes, Judges 20-21, and went on to produce impactful figures, including King Saul, Israel's first monarch. Situated at the border of Judah, from which the Davidic dynasty would emerge, and the northern tribes such as Ephraim, the tribe of Benjamin often served as a mediator during times of national crisis. This strategic location not only involved Benjamin in territorial disputes, but also placed it at the center of crucial decisions for the survival and cohesion of Israel's tribes. Despite their bravery and resilience, how would the tribe of Benjamin face one of the darkest episodes in their history, coming perilously close to extinction? The story of the tribe of Benjamin reaches one of its bleakest moments in the incident at Gibeah, recounted in Judges 19 through 21. This episode exposed the moral decay within Israel during the time of the Judges and led to a devastating conflict that nearly annihilated the tribe of Benjamin. It all began with the arrival of a Levite in Gibeah, accompanied by his concubine, as they returned to their home in Ephraim. At nightfall, they sought shelter in the city, which belonged to the territory of the tribe of Benjamin. An elderly man welcomed them into his home, but the men of the city, described as wicked, surrounded the house and demanded that the Levite be handed over to them. This behavior, reminiscent of the depravity of Sodom during Abraham's time, Genesis 19, revealed how deeply corruption had taken root in Israel. The host, in an attempt to protect the Levite, offered his own daughter and the traveler's concubine instead. In an act of desperation, the concubine was given over and was brutally abused throughout the night, succumbing to her injuries by morning. Finding his concubine dead, the Levite took a drastic step. He divided her body into 12 parts and sent each part to the tribes of Israel. This shocking act was a call for the tribes to respond to the heinous crime committed in Gibeah. The response was swift and unified. All the tribes gathered at Mizpah, where the Levite recounted the events and demanded justice. The tribes agreed to act against Gibeah, but first they gave the tribe of Benjamin an opportunity to hand over the guilty men. The Benjamites, however, refused to comply. This refusal was seen as an act of complicity, and the tribes decided to declare war against Benjamin. Thus began a fratricidal conflict that would deeply scar Israel. The combined army of the tribes of Israel totaled 400,000 men, while Benjamin could muster only 26,700 warriors. Despite the numerical disadvantage, the Benjamites demonstrated remarkable resistance thanks to their combat skills. The left-handed warriors of Benjamin were particularly feared for their prowess with slings, described as being able to sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Judges 20:16. In the first 2 days of battle, Benjamin dealt surprising defeats to the Israelite army, killing over 40,000 men. This performance underscored the tribe's skill and courage, but also fueled the determination of the other tribes to destroy Gibeah and its defenders. On the third day, Israel changed its strategy. Using an ambush, the Israelites managed to lure the Benjamites out of their fortified city. As the Benjamites advanced, an Israelite detachment entered Gibeah and set the city on fire. By the time the Benjamites realized what was happening, it was too late. Surrounded and outnumbered, they were massacred. The war was devastating. Most of the men, women, and children of the tribe of Benjamin were killed, and their cities were destroyed. By the end of the conflict, only 600 Benjamite warriors managed to escape, finding refuge at the Rock of Rimmon. Benjamin's territory was left desolate, and the tribe stood on the brink of extinction. The battle against Gibeah was a dark milestone in Israel's history. It not only exposed the moral degradation of the people, but also demonstrated how the lack of unifying leadership could lead to internal destruction. With their population reduced to a handful of survivors, Benjamin was virtually annihilated. But how would these 600 lives shape the future of the tribe and its position among the 12 tribes of Israel? The civil war against Benjamin left Israel deeply shaken. The near-complete massacre of the tribe, coupled with the destruction of its cities and the loss of women and children, revealed the devastating cost of internal conflict. However, the remaining tribes soon realized that the elimination of Benjamin would not only be a tragedy for national unity, but would also undermine God's promise concerning the 12 tribes of Israel. After the battle, the tribes of Israel gathered at Bethel, where they mourned the consequences of their own wrath. Why has this happened in Israel that today one tribe is missing in Israel? Judges 21:3. The awareness that Benjamin was an indispensable part of the chosen people led the tribes to seek a solution to preserve the remnants of the tribe. The main problem was that before the conflict, the tribes had sworn not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites, Judges 21:1. This vow further complicated the situation as the 600 surviving Benjamite men had no wives, meaning the tribe would have no way to recover. Amid this crisis, a controversial and drastic solution was found. It was discovered that the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead had not participated in the conflict against Benjamin. As punishment, the Israelites attacked the city, killing all the men and married women but sparing 400 virgin women. These women were given to the Benjamites as wives. To address the remaining numerical shortfall, the Israelites allowed the Benjamites to abduct women during an annual celebration in Shiloh, where young women danced at a religious festival. This measure allowed the remaining men to take wives without the tribes directly breaking their vow not to give their daughters in marriage. While these actions are morally problematic, they reflected the urgency and complexity of the moment. The tribes were determined to save Benjamin, but did so in a way that preserved their own traditions and oaths. With new wives, the 600 surviving Benjamite men began the process of rebuilding. They resettled their lands and reconstructed their destroyed cities, including Gibeah. Though weakened, the tribe gradually regained its strength and its place within the confederation of Israel's tribes. This restoration was not only physical but also symbolic. The survival of Benjamin demonstrated that, even amidst human failures and tragedies, God preserves his purpose for Israel. The integrity of the 12 tribes was maintained, ensuring that the divine plan for a unified nation remained intact. The episode of Gibeah and the subsequent restoration of Benjamin had profound implications for Israel. The Civil War highlighted the state of fragmentation and moral decay among the people of Israel. The absence of central leadership, such as an effective king or judge, left the tribes vulnerable to internal conflicts. This episode reinforced the need for a unifying government, which would later manifest in the transition to monarchy. Though restored, the tribe of Benjamin bore the scars of the massacre. Its reduced population and history of near extinction shaped its identity as a resilient tribe, but one viewed with suspicion by the other tribes. The crisis at Gibeah and the solution adopted created fissures in the relationships among the tribes. The war revealed how fragile the bonds uniting Israel were, and Benjamin's restoration occurred amidst resentment and tension. The restoration of Benjamin paved the way for future events, such as the rise of Israel's first king, Saul, who came from this tribe. Benjamin's survival ensured that it would continue to play a strategic and symbolic role in Israel's history. The story of Benjamin's survival and restoration serves as a powerful reminder of divine mercy and the need for reconciliation. Despite acts of violence and human errors, the continuity of the tribe was assured, pointing to God's greater plan for Israel. How could a tribe marked by near destruction become the birthplace of leaders and figures who would change the course of Israel's history? The choice of Saul as Israel's first king marks a crucial moment in the history of God's people. Saul, a Benjamite, not only brought prominence to the tribe of Benjamin, but also represented a choice that reflected the complexities of leadership in Israel. Saul was the son of Kish, a powerful man from the tribe of Benjamin, and lived in Gibeah, the very city that had been the site of the dark episode in the tribe's history. Described as a young man, handsome and tall, among the Israelites there was no one more handsome than he. He was a head taller than anyone else. 1 Samuel 9:2, Saul possessed the appearance the people desired in a leader. His rise to the throne began humbly. While searching for his father's lost donkeys, Saul encountered the prophet Samuel, who had received instructions from God to anoint Saul as king. Saul's selection was a response to the people of Israel's demand for a monarch to lead them in battles and bring unity amidst the chaos. Saul was anointed king during a time of national instability, as the tribes of Israel faced constant external threats, such as the Philistines, while still grappling with internal divisions. His first major victory, leading the people against the Ammonites, 1 Samuel 11, solidified his role as a military leader and elevated the tribe of Benjamin to prominence. Saul's origin in Benjamin significantly influenced his trajectory. The tribe, small and marked by near extinction during the civil war with Israel, was viewed with a mixture of distrust and respect. This dual perception was reflected in Saul's personality, as he often displayed insecurity and a constant need to prove his worth. Saul also carried the military legacy of Benjamin, the renown of Benjamite warriors as strategists and skilled fighters aligned with his ability to lead armies. However, the pressure to meet expectations and the tension among the tribes of Israel often placed him in situations of political and spiritual conflict. Saul's leadership ended tragically. His disobedience to God and his jealousy toward David led to divine rejection of his reign, and his death on the battlefield against the Philistines, 1 Samuel 31, marked the end of his dynasty. Nonetheless, his rise to the throne underscored Benjamin's role as a strategically impactful tribe in Israel. When Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 BC by the Babylonians, the people of Israel were taken into exile. The tribe of Benjamin, as part of the kingdom of Judah, shared the fate of their fellow Judeans, living in captivity for decades. During the exile, the tribe of Benjamin maintained its cultural and religious identity alongside the other remnants of Judah. Although specific references to Benjamin during the exile are scarce, their integration into the kingdom of Judah ensured their survival as a significant part of the Jewish people. When Cyrus, king of Persia, issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem in 538 BC, the tribe of Benjamin was among those who returned to rebuild the city and the temple. Nehemiah 11:4-36 mentions Benjamites who resettled in Jerusalem, indicating their contribution to the restoration of the city. The strategic location of Benjamin's territory, including areas near Jerusalem, reinforced their presence in the post-exilic reorganization of the kingdom. Although less prominent compared to the tribes of Judah and Levi during this period, Benjamin remained an essential part of the reconstruction of the Jewish nation. The tribe of Benjamin produced notable figures beyond Saul, including military heroes and leaders who left their mark on Israel's history. Among these examples is the role of Benjamite warriors as loyal fighters during David's reign and in battles that defined Israel's destiny. Another prominent figure was Esther, who, though more famously associated as a Jewish descendant in Susa, hailed from Benjamin's lineage. She became queen of Persia and saved her people from extermination. Her courage and leadership demonstrate the tribe's enduring influence, even in contexts beyond Israel. In the New Testament, Paul of Tarsus, also known as the Apostle Paul, was a Benjamite. He played a transformative role in the expansion of Christianity, bringing the message of Jesus to the Gentiles and writing a significant portion of the New Testament. His Benjamite heritage is mentioned in Romans 11:1 and Philippians 3:5, highlighting the tribe's legacy even during the era of early Christianity. Benjamin's geographical position was always strategic. Situated between Judah and Ephraim, the tribe often served as a bridge between the northern and southern regions of Israel. This location also made it vulnerable, frequently embroiled in territorial conflicts and power struggles. During the division of the kingdom, Benjamin remained loyal to the house of David, becoming part of the kingdom of Judah. This alliance helped strengthen the southern kingdom in times of crisis and preserved the tribe's connection to Jerusalem. The final mentions of the tribe of Benjamin in the Old Testament occurred during the post-exilic period, when the Benjamites were among those who resettled in Jerusalem. Nehemiah and Ezra highlight their participation in rebuilding the temple and reorganizing religious life in Judah. In the New Testament, Paul the Apostle is the tribe's primary connection to the emerging Christian movement. He cites his Benjamite origin as proof that God has not rejected the people of Israel, affirming the continuity of the divine promise to the tribes. Romans 11:1. While the Bible does not provide extensive details about the ultimate fate of the tribe of Benjamin, its role in the history of Israel is enduring. From near extinction at Gibeah to the rise of Saul, through the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the contributions of Paul, Benjamin exemplifies resilience and significance. The story of Benjamin concludes as a testament to survival and the ability of a small but strategically placed tribe to leave a lasting impact on the history of Israel and beyond. Thank you